The Labour leadership has very strong opinions about a ceasefire in Israel's military campaign in Gaza. It would be a bad idea, they say. On other issues, though, they're happy to sit on the fence. Those issues include, but are not limited to, bombing hospitals, bombing refugee camps, and now using white phosphorus. Here's Labour frontbencher Liz Kendall.
It's not illegal to use white phosphorus in certain circumstances. It is, as far as I can understand international law, it is illegal to use it in crowded areas where civilians are. If Israel is doing that, what would the Labour Party want to say?
So I understand why you and others have asked and will continue to ask us about individual incidents and what's happening. I think it would be unwise when we are not on the ground to make comments about that and to make pronouncements. I think it's interesting that the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court said earlier this week he hasn't and he won't give a running commentary on what is happening. He will gather all the evidence and look at how the law is being followed by Israel and Hamas. He wants good quality evidence that can be taken to a court of law. That's what he's focused on. And if he won't give a running commentary, I think it is absolutely unwise for politicians to do that either.
That was Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall talking to Kay Burley. Kay Burley was asking, do you oppose white phosphorus usage? And Liz Kendall was rambling on. She did not say no. And Kay Burley was not asking Liz Kendall about an individual incident. She was asking about the general principle, should white phosphorus be used on civilian populations? Liz Kendall made Labour's position very clear. We can't be bothered to come to any sort of position if the only people being killed in this situation are Palestinians in Gaza. And it didn't get any better for Liz Kendall in that interview.
Just heard from the government, they say that they would condemn the use of white phosphorus. Is Labour going to...
I mean, nobody wants to see that ever happening. We actually want an end to all loss of life. But I think it is right that those responsible for dealing with these issues gather the evidence. We shouldn't give a running commentary on that, even though I really understand that people want us to say on every incident what is right and what is wrong.
We don't need you to say that about every incident. We just like you to say that about any incident. There doesn't seem to be any action that the Labour Party will take a position on if it only affects Palestinians. And as Liz Kendall found out there, white phosphorus, they're more hardline than the Tory government. Science and Technology Secretary Michelle Donlan had told Kay Burley earlier in the show, quote, I don't agree with the use of white phosphorus. I think that's quite clear. But what is white phosphorus? Well, Amnesty International says this. White phosphorus is an incendiary substance mostly used to create a dense smoke screen or mark targets. When exposed to air, it burns at extremely high temperatures and often starts fires in the areas in which it's deployed. People exposed to white phosphorus can suffer respiratory damage, organ failure, and other horrific and life-changing injuries, including burns that are extremely difficult to treat and cannot be put out with water. Burns affecting only 10% of the body are often fatal. Because of those deadly effects, it is illegal to use white phosphorus in or close to civilian infrastructure. And Amnesty International says that Israel has indeed been guilty of that act. This footage, verified by Amnesty, shows what appears to be a white phosphorus incendiary bomb exploding above Al-Mari, a Lebanese town on the border with Israel. As you can see, the bomb explodes in the air and then breaks up into burning pieces of white phosphorus, which burn as they're exposed to oxygen, releasing large amounts of smoke and heat. Amnesty say that this incident and the use of white phosphorus in another town, Daria, should be investigated as a war crime. In their investigation into the incident, Amnesty interviewed the mayor of Daria, who told them this. A very bad odour and massive cloud covered the town so that we were not able to see beyond 5 or 6 metres in front of us. This caused people to frantically flee their homes, and when some returned 2 days later, their houses were still burning. Cars caught fire, land areas were also burnt down. Until today, you find remnants the size of a fist that reignite when exposed to air. Infinite burning substance. It sounds literally like hell. And this hell has been confirmed by Amnesty International to be being used in Gaza. Human Rights Watch also verified this video of white phosphorus use in Gaza early on in the campaign Israel is waging there. As you can see, a bomb explodes above that high-rise building and sprays out clear lines of white smoke consistent with the use of white phosphorus. Medical professionals have also said they've seen injuries consistent with the use of white phosphorus. Kay Burley put that claim to an IDF spokesperson.
We had Dr. Omar Abdul Manam, a paediatric neurologist who's here in the UK, on the programme earlier on this morning. He says a child is dying every 8 minutes, but he went on to make this suggestion that from the injuries he's seen, white phosphorus is being used. Is it?
That's a very professional observation from London, from the comfort of his sofa. I would be very cautious. No, I'd be very cautious in trying to judge any of the professional activities that are taking place. The IDF operates within the realm of the laws of armed conflict. The tools that we utilize are in accordance to the international humanitarian law.
Is it being used?
Challenge and international humanitarian law does not prohibit
phosphorus being used.
Kay, the laws of armed conflict do not prohibit the use of
is it being used?
Explosives. And I don't have any instances where it has been used, but it can be used.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you for the clarification. You're saying it's not been used. I'm going to take your word for it, sir. You're on the ground.
Okay,
so you're saying it's not being used.
But I would say there are legitimate ways to utilize different munitions.
I asked you if it was being used. You said it's not. I'm going to take your word for it.
Was that a denial? I couldn't quite work it out. In any case, the IDF is certainly not to be trusted on issues such as this. In 2009, there were widespread reports of Israel using white phosphorus in Gaza. Israel vociferously denied it before backtracking a few weeks later. This is from a Times article published in January 2009. After weeks of denying that it used white phosphorus in the heavily populated Gaza Strip, Israel finally admitted yesterday that the weapon was deployed in its offensive. The army's use of white phosphorus was first reported by The Times on January 5th, when it was strenuously denied by the army. Now, in the face of mounting evidence and international outcry, Israel has been forced to backtrack on that initial denial. Yes, phosphorus was used, but not in any illegal manner, Yigal Palmor, a foreign ministry spokesman, told The Times. Some practices could be illegal, but we're going into that. The IDF is holding an investigation concerning one specific incident. The incident in question is thought to be the firing of phosphorus shells at a UN school in Bet Lahia in the northern Gaza Strip on January 17th. Yes, phosphorus was used, but not in any illegal manner. We use this hellfire that doesn't stop burning when it's exposed to oxygen, but we didn't use it illegally, of course. The UN would go on to commission a judge-led report into Israel's 2009 bombardment of Gaza. It concluded Israel had been, quote, systematically reckless in determining the use of white phosphorus use in built-up areas. Reckless or deliberate? Michael, this substance is horrible. So why are Labour so reluctant to acknowledge the use of it?
I mean, I don't know. I find it just so awful. I mean, basically watching the Labour Party answer any question on Gaza at the moment. And I suppose a number of reasons, I mean, there are loads of reasons why it's offensive. One of them, I think, is just the lack of care, right? I know they don't want to take strong positions because they're terrified of being seen as remotely more progressive than the Conservative Party. I don't know why that would terrify them, but it seems to terrify them. But they don't seem to have done, the most basic things to learn about international law, right? And this is going to be, obviously, she's not shadow foreign secretary, but this is going to be in the news for a very long time. Shadow ministers are going to get asked about the war on Gaza every day. So I feel like they should brush up on some things, right? Instead of just say, whatever they ask you, just say, oh, we couldn't possibly comment. Oh, we couldn't possibly comment. There are 2 million people living under siege. You might be too pathetic, too abject to make a strong position against those people being put under siege, but you could at least learn the basics, right? And the basics are that the reason why white phosphorus is it's an international crime, a war crime, to be used in built-up civilian areas is because it is a war crime to do indiscriminate attacks. So it has to be the case that when you launch a bomb, you can say we have made some reference to whether or not we're targeting a military target or civilian targets. Now, white phosphorus, because you can't target it, basically, it goes everywhere. That, by definition, can't be targeted if you're using it in a built-up area. Now, that shouldn't be too hard for a Labour frontbencher to know. You don't have to be an expert in the laws of war to be able to say, well, if this indiscriminate bomb is used in a built-up area, that is a war crime by definition. You don't have to say, did Israel use it here? Did Israel use it there? I think that's fine. You say, okay, well, Amnesty have said it is. Obviously, we haven't been able to do our independent research. We haven't spoken to the British intelligence services or whatever. But you should be able to lay out the basics of what is international law. It's also important to know, I interviewed the UK director for Human Rights Watch yesterday on this show. The thing with human rights law is it's not necessarily catching a state out for the worst thing it does. It's catching a state out for the most clear-cut thing it does. So even when you're talking to Human Rights Watch, when they're talking about bombing a refugee camp, for example, they will say this raises shed loads of concerns. And the implication is, we think this is a war crime, and at least we think this is terrible. We think it's an incredibly morally abject thing to do. But there is an argument that can be made by Israel's lawyers where they say, look, this wasn't indiscriminate because we were targeting a military target, in this case, a Hamas commander. And it so happened that we couldn't avoid killing civilians in the area if we were to target this Hamas fighter. Now, I think any argument whereby it's legitimate to kill 100 kids to kill one military officer is morally abhorrent. But in the legal sense, there is a debate to be had. What counts as proportionate? When it comes to indiscriminate weaponry, white phosphorus is hellish. It hasn't killed as many people in this war as bog standard airstrikes has, right? So in terms of the overall damage which has been done, I would much prefer it if Israel stopped using airstrikes and if they stopped using white phosphorus. But white phosphorus is really clear cut because there is no way you can target it. So even if it's causing less damage than targeted airstrikes, it's very clear cut that it would be a war crime because it's indiscriminate. And I don't think it should be, too much to ask of a government in waiting, as they keep telling us they are, to know some of the basics on this, to at least be able to give an answer beyond, we couldn't possibly comment. We couldn't possibly comment, which to me kind of just reads as, we don't really care, right? If you have literally nothing to say about the prospect of white phosphorus being dropped on the people of Gaza, is that how little they matter to you? Is that how little they matter to you that this has been going on for 3 weeks now? You've got genocidal language coming from the Israeli government. You've got around 9,000 people killed, potentially 1,000 under rubble. You've got 3,000 kids killed. And the only thing you can say is boilerplate. This is very sad, but we can't really comment, and Israel has a right to defend itself. I just think it's despicable that you haven't even shown the respect to do the basic research on what is legal, what is illegal, what one might hypothetically be for or against. We're not saying they have to have this, we know exactly who caused the explosion in this or that hospital, right? But you can have the basics, your basic principles. What is right? What is wrong? What is legal? What is illegal? They've got nothing to say on any of this.
I think you're being a bit too generous, actually, Michael. I don't think it's a case that they don't know that this is against humanitarian law. We've seen the internal directives that we reported on in Novara, the lines that the Labour Party are being whipped to stick to, which is can't possibly comment, I can't do this, can't do that. This is a party led by somebody who has staked his reputation on being, this beacon of law and order. Starmer, at the very top of the party, has been like, well, under me, we'll get fairness. Under me, we will get an adherence to law. Under me, the law will be the ultimate place where the buck stops. Everyone is equal under law. And now, in this first actual major test of both being an international statesman and, his actual adherence to that legislation as a guiding both moral and political force, he's failed it completely. And the party members are just at sea because the stuff coming from the top of the party, the directives coming from the top of the party is, couldn't possibly comment on that, plead ignorance, plead ignorance. You can't plead ignorance when your attorney general is a human rights lawyer. You've got, various legal professionals, but your actual Labour leader is a top form of human rights law. There is no way that you can plead ignorance. I know that white phosphorus use is obviously considered to be, a war crime. I'm not a human rights lawyer. I really don't think it's that they've not done the reading. I think it's that they're too cowardly even to comment on something like that because of the other thing you identified, that they see this as not a human rights issue. They see this as a left-right issue, and they think that it's too left-wing to support the Palestinian cause. That's how it shakes up in my mind.